Well, good afternoon for those on the East Coast. We're broadcasting today from beautiful Research Triangle in Raleigh, North Carolina. Today's webinar is about visionary voices and weathering the change of clinical trials. And I'm Michael Raymer, CEO of Pro-ficiency. We're very honored to have as our guest today, Jeanne Hecht. Jeanne has a fabulous background in the clinical trial industry. Jeanne and I first met several years ago when I was working on a spin out of Oxford in the NASH space, and she was supporting a similar company out of France. And so I got to know her there a little bit, and we're really excited to have her join our board. Part of the skill set she is exceptional at is commercialization. And so as a board member, she's providing a lot of great advice to our management team and as a value contributor at the board level. So Jeanne, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and kind of what you're doing now, and maybe give us some sense of the steps you took along your career.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Well, it's great to talk to you and great to talk to everybody on this webinar. I've been in the life sciences, pharmaceutical services, clinical trial space for almost a little bit over 27 years. And I started out actually as an investigational drug services pharmacy technician. And so I was one of the people working in a large academic medical center who would, take the pills, put them inside another fake pill so you couldn't tell whether or not you were taking a placebo or the investigational product, for example. And after doing that, to put myself through school, when I graduated, I took a little time away to be a special needs teacher, living in the beautiful island of Oahu in Hawaii, and came back to the mainland and decided I wanted to get back in the pharmaceutical industry and took a job at Park Davis in regulatory affairs. That led me to North Carolina, where I worked at the Cancer Center at the University of North Carolina as regulatory affairs officer, as well as a study coordinator on some of the brain cancer programs for glioblastoma that we were doing at the Cancer Center at the time. Then I left the Cancer Center and went to Quintiles back in 2000 and spent a lot of time at Quintiles, over 16 years in roles both within operations and the commercial side. Lived in the United States, lived in Singapore, had a wonderful time and experience there, and then left to be the chief operating officer for a medical imaging business, as you know, and that's when our paths crossed. And then later took the CEO position for an ophthalmology development services firm. Since roughly the end of 2000, I have been doing just board and advisory work. So supporting great companies like yourself on growth strategies, both domestic and international, and specifically around building out really robust commercial teams, operational teams, financial organizations, and helping these companies of all different shapes and sizes and all different sectors within the marketplace really build out their growth story. And when I think a little bit about my career, and I think a little bit about what was probably one of the most impactful jobs that I had, I have to say it was as a project manager. And I did that early on when I was at Quintiles, kind of 2000 to 2004-ish. And I learned at that time the intersection of customer service and operations, so commercial and operations. And I learned specifically, as we all talk about, the time quality cost stool or three-legged stool that exists out there in that equation. And I also learned the importance of customer service. And it's led me to just be a generalist from a business perspective, and something that I really enjoy. So I'm loving what I'm doing. So thank you for allowing me to be on your board. And I look forward to continuing to support Pro-ficiency and the other organizations that I support within my portfolio.
That's awesome career advice. So, I imagine there are people today that have dialed into the webinar that are looking at someone like yourself that had great success. And it sounds like that, if you have an opportunity in your career and you have not yet been a project manager in a large-scale CRO, to see multiple therapeutic lines being launched globally, that'd be a great career move if you aspire to kind of improve your overall position in this really fascinating space of life science and drug discovery.
It helped me a lot, Mike, on a couple of different fronts. So when I went from operations, from project management into the commercial side of the organization, it helped me to be more consultative and more like an advisor to my customers, as opposed to, for lack of a terrible overused term, an order taker, right? And so I was able to support my customers as they were trying to shape out the clinical program that they were doing, that they were trying to ask us to either bid on or to help assess whether or not the doability of the actual program. And I couldn't agree more. You also get skilled in matrix management and also understanding timelines, the various dependencies within the timelines, and then also who's accountable for what within the actual execution of the clinical trial, and why it's important that there's one owner for specific tasks as opposed to multiple owners, where that can lead to confusion. So it was a really good experience for me.
Awesome. I think that's really great career advice for those that tuned in, and maybe that's commercial they weren't expecting, but people are always looking for what they can do to kind of improve their position in the industry. I think that's really sage and wise advice. So a couple housekeeping items for those that are not Zoom experts, which I think virtually all of us are, but a little used function at the bottom of the screen is Q&A. So if anyone in the audience has a question for Jeanne, type it in there, and at the appropriate time, we'll interject it into the dialogue that we're having. The other thing that we'll do is we'll have some poll questions as we go through also to get feedback from you in terms of what's going on in your organization, so that everyone can learn from the collective knowledge of not only Jeanne, but also everyone that's dialed into the webinar today. So Jeanne, one thing we hear is that clinical research organizations and clinical research in general, life sciences is really resistant to change. So you've been in the industry for a span of time. Have you seen the same thing, or is that a knock that the industry unjustly gets?
So I'd say clearly the industry has evolved since when I entered it, because when I entered it, we filled out these paper forms called case report forms. And then eventually we got sophisticated and faxed them in. And now it's all electronic. Additionally, we've gone from having paper forms as it relates to the consent to e-consent, paper questionnaires to e-COAs. We're starting to use wearables and tracking data on patients. And there's been an entire subsector of the business, of the industry, multiple businesses focusing on the area. With that said, I do think we work in a highly regulated environment, as we all know. And a lot of times companies like to take risk to zero, or they want to minimize the risk. And whenever anybody starts talking about, their risk avatar, or specifically how they're going to manage risk, a lot of times that might mean that people hide behind a standard operating procedure. And, standard operating procedures can be changed and evolved over time, as we all know. And so I do think that this industry can be resistant to change. Now, I think Pro-ficiency is a great example of how the industry is accepting changes. So for example, it used to be, and I remember this distinctly, I remember flying to Spain to go do training in Madrid, which was good because I got to eat some wonderful food, drink some amazing wine, and meet some amazing people. But at the same point in time, I think about the number of days I was out of the office to do this training that probably could have been, and easily could have been, delivered in a simulation-based environment, that I might have even retained more. So I think that as we think about the industry, it is oftentimes reticent to change, but that does not mean that change is impossible. I think the good quality that many of us have is that we're impatient, and that impatience to change is something that we all need to continue to foster, so that we don't get so stuck in our ways that we're not able to adapt, and therefore our businesses individually and collectively fail.
It's really fascinating. So when I was at GE, I worked in a strategy organization, and one of the things that they taught you was the item that has high impact and will likely happen, you are totally accountable for. And if you miss something there, that was a big miss as a operating unit manager. I think COVID taught us the upper left-hand box, which is the low probability thing that has a major impact. So what do you see as some of the impacts that COVID had on this industry? What did we learn from it? And, you know, are there things that we'll do permanently differently, or are we going to kind of step back into the pre-COVID operating mode? What's your perspective on that?
Well, so I think COVID taught us a lot. So the first thing it taught us is that all of this office space we spend a lot of money for isn't necessarily required on a full-time basis for all employees. And that can lead to a better quality of life of our workforce, which can drive higher employee engagement. It also, though, taught us that we need to be smarter and act differently in how we engage those employees. And when we think about just general corporate culture building, general line management, it's sometimes easier to do that when we're all within the same four walls. It is harder to do that when we're all home-based. Similarly, you know, the delivery of training, new product launches, making sure that individuals are, you know, updating specific documents that are required for, you know, annual updates, et cetera, that can be delivered in a different manner than, for example, interofficing mailing forms to people for them to sign and send back in. So I think we've learned a lot on how we can leverage technology to support a remote-based workforce. When I think about the clinical trials market, it taught us a lot too about how patients travel through the care system and how within a major pandemic that pathway will change. And that because that pathway can change, that then created, and I think accelerated significantly, the notion of hybrid or decentralized trials. Well, when we're having a hybrid or decentralized trials, we then need to have additional technologies to support the delivery of the hybrid or decentralized trials. It taught us also a lot about how to engage with our customers, and how it used to be, as a sales rep, you would schedule meetings and, you know, you'd go to New Jersey Monday through Thursday, and then you'd go home on a Thursday night and you'd go and see a ton of different customers. Well, now, and during COVID, there were some restrictions on visitors. And so how are we engaging our customers? This industry used to spend a tremendous amount of money on bid defenses. That's not necessary. We used to spend a lot of time on in-person investigator meetings. Again, with different systems like the Pro-ficiency simulation-based trainings modules, there's an opportunity to be able to use proficiency in the delivery of those trainings, as opposed to having every meeting be an investigator meeting. I think the other thing that it really shined a light on is the talent restrictions that we have as an industry, and the lack of talent that we have coming in at an entry-level perspective every single year. And when we think about college degrees, there are very few schools that have a degree in clinical research. There are a lot of schools that have a degree in engineering and different types of engineering, or accounting, or marketing, right? Since we don't have a tremendous number of schools that have undergraduate or graduate degrees in clinical research, I'll put a plug for the Masters of Clinical Research at Wake Forest. That's a great online master's program specific to clinical research. Since we don't have those, we need to find ways in which we can grow the talent pool that we need, who are the individuals delivering the work at the point of a patient, or at the point of where data is collected, or at the point of where data is analyzed. I know ACRP has done some work as well, and I was at one of their think tanks at the last meeting where we talked about the arbitrary requirements that are placed on entry-level resources, and specifically in the push and pull that happens between pharma, CROs, sites, pharma sites, and the expectations that we have regarding the resources doing that work, where there's oftentimes an arbitrary minimum of 2 years or 4 years of experience required. That's again where companies like Pro-ficiency can help, because we could help individuals with proficiency-based training, as well as supporting them in on-the-job training that's done in a virtual environment through a simulation-based platform. We'll send out the link, by the way. I think I've given it to the team on the ACRP white paper. For those of you, you can expect to receive it afterwards, because it does go into this at a high level and talk about the challenges before the industry, and then what individuals are trying to do to address those challenges. But I think that COVID shined a light on that, because we all know that I don't think there's any company, and we're still in a really high growth phase, because our industry is growing at over 8% per year, that we need more talent, and we have to find ways to grow talent or to upskill talent quicker, so that we can start to remove some of those artificial barriers.
No, I think those are great insights, but everyone doesn't get to join the webinar and not work yourself. So we're going to have our first poll that'll pop up, and it's: how has COVID-19 affected your organization's clinical trials? And so please take a moment to answer that question. I want to echo everything that Jeanne said, in particular, the need to grow the population of CRAs in the industry. I hear that repeatedly, whether I'm talking with sponsor organizations, whether I'm talking with CROs, and it's really a critical problem for us to solve as an industry. So take advantage of the poll being up. And, next, what are some things that you feel are limiting our profession, our industry segment? And has, this period of rapid change under COVID, has it created some concerns or challenges for sponsors in general?
I empathize a lot with our sponsors and how difficult it must be to understand the various technologies and service providers that exist to help deliver on their clinical trials. And oftentimes our sponsors use the same technologies over and over, even if perhaps, or even the same service providers, even if perhaps it's suboptimal. And they do so because the qualification process takes a very long time. So I empathize with them as it relates to the challenges that are before our sponsors. I think as an industry, we could all do better at finding ways to cooperate and collaborate with one another. That doesn't mean we need to release our secret sauce or our intellectual property, but I love when I see various different groups coming together to tackle a challenge from multiple different angles, even when they could potentially be competitors. Because in those instances, if we can address and solve industry-wide challenges, all boats could potentially rise. I also think, and this is something that I've always believed, that unless we're listening to our customers, and for some of us, our customers are sites, for some of us, our customers are patients, for some of us, our customers are sponsors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if as an industry, we do a fantastic job of trying to get a deep understanding of multiple different levels of that customer base. Sometimes we go back to the same customers. And so at the end of the day, are we drinking our own Kool-Aid? Or we're not able to get a wide enough berth in the types of customers that we should be asking questions to. There's an opportunity here for us to take cues from other industries. I feel like we've learned a lot from the B2C industry, so the business to consumer industries. And we've seen how Amazon has been able to allow us to all stay in our homes and still get, jelly beans, flour, and books delivered all on the same day, right? And maybe even a rake thrown in there. And so if they're able to do that in a really complex distribution / supplier management approach, maybe we could start taking some cues from there. And I know we are, and I'm just impatient, as I said earlier. So I want to continue to see us do that. One of the last things I'll end on is I read a really amazing case study about Chick-fil-A. So for those of you that know what a Chick-fil-A is, and how Chick-fil-A was able to really come out and do record gains during COVID-19 by instituting its new drive-through and how it manages the drive-through and the multiple lanes in the drive-through. I mean, they actually looked at COVID as an opportunity for them to innovate in their business model. There were a lot of other food chains that didn't do that. So I guess for me, when I think about COVID and I think about the industry and I think beyond COVID, perhaps we shouldn't wait for a pandemic to try to innovate and do things differently, because there's a lot of patience waiting for us to actually get this right.
No, I totally agree. And why don't you put up the results of the poll? And I just want to pick up on Chick-fil-A as an example. So during COVID, I lived in Colorado. And the first time they set up a testing site, it was a complete disaster when run by the state. So who did they call to come straighten it out? It was Chick-fil-A.
Wow.
And within 2 or 3 days, the throughput within the testing site was dramatically improved through, really just leveraging best practices that they've learned as a firm. So, here in the South, my wife and I are not from North Carolina. We call Chick-fil-A like Bug Light for Southerners. Because when you drive past a Chick-fil-A, it doesn't matter what time of day, there are 2 or 3 lanes backed up in the drive-through. And it is, they did an amazing job of customer service. And we could learn a lot in customer service from companies like Amazon, companies like Chick-fil-A, all that have been, very disruptive in terms of how they've approached serving their industry. I was in Seattle for a number of years, knew a lot of people at Amazon. And, it's so funny that Amazon started as a book business, and they were packing books in the office one day. And a friend of mine was at the scene of the crime on this. And Jeff Bezos is down on the floor packing books. And he said, we really need to put down some cushions on the floor to pack these books. And someone else, process improvement, why don't we get a table and we'll stand up at a table and pack them. But to see where Amazon started today to where they went, it was just, they were maniacal about their desire and drive to improve and transform. And certainly I think COVID gave us a lot of push in that direction. So, we see the results from those online, that escalating study costs were an issue, reduction of availability of on-site staff. Clearly, everyone was impacted by that. Delayed timelines, increase in protocol deviations, which is unfortunate. And then others had things not listed above. So, I think we learned a lot during COVID. And I think we need to look at the things that went really well and then the things we can improve upon. What are some recommendations you'd have for organizations in our space to make change and drive growth? What have you seen other organizations do to attack these challenges? You alluded to that a little bit in the previous answer, but maybe you could give us some more ideas for those that are dialed in today to discuss.
Yeah, I think what I really like and what I think is unnecessary is I like how a lot of times we rely on industry groups to drive think tanks or discussions. And one of the things that I've always really appreciated is having a wide network. And when I am faced with a challenge, reaching out to people within my network who might have addressed this in another industry and another company at another time in their life, and that they can share that with me. So the first probably piece of advice, which is less for companies and more for individuals, is for you to spend some time investing in your network, and not in a inauthentic manner, but in an authentic way in which they can call on you and you can call on them when you're faced with a particular challenge. The other thing I would say is it's really important for us to be curious. And as individual leaders, as companies, we should never be satisfied with the data that's right before us. We should be thinking about the future and how that data is going to potentially shift. And we should be spending a lot of time trying to understand more about the future environment, what could happen to it, similar to your GE chart, right? And spending a lot of time having those discussions. Way too often, companies spend their times internally getting the sausage made. Very little do they think about what the future type of sausage should be that they're making. And as a result, I think a lot of times you see variability in company performance, and we spend a lot of time on our back foot. The only other thing I would say too is that there's nothing wrong with a pilot. There is nothing wrong with testing out new processes, new approach, new technologies. Too often, though, do companies either for example, want to, on the service provider or technology provider side, want to secure that really large deal. And so they're going to go after a real complex phase 3 program or delivery model or whatever, as opposed to trying to get their feet wet in a phase 1 or phase 2 program and learn so that they could be really highly successful in a complex phase 3. But vice versa, we need customers and different stakeholders to be willing to and open to piloting and testing new processes, new technologies, new systems, et cetera, so that we can constantly be pushing the envelope on how we improve the time, cost, quality equation.
Awesome. I think a couple things I want to pick up on there, and maybe you could give some tips to those that are dialed in today. I agree. Networking is an art.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily come natural to people. Myself, I would point to LinkedIn being an amazing tool to basically network within the industry. And I think as personally, it's not only just the people I work with, but if I meet someone really interesting at a meeting, or a physician that I think is exceptionally bright and is on pace to be a really key KOL, I immediately seek out and link them not on Facebook, but rather LinkedIn.
Yes.
Because that's the opportunity for you to see them progress through the industry, maybe the thoughtful posts that they have, the articles that they recommend that you read, et cetera. Beyond LinkedIn, what are some other ways that people could improve how they network, when they haven't had the benefit of a longer career like you and I have? What are some ways in which you think people could network beyond LinkedIn?
So one I'd say is your alumni group. So first, let's talk about the university that you've gone to and think about within that university, the alumni group, and how can you leverage potentially the alumni group or upcoming alumni events to be able to connect you with people. If you're trying to learn a lot more by finance, they connect you with people who have roles within a finance organization or within finance. If you're trying to learn more about infrastructure services and IT, could you use that alumni network there? Your friends. I mean, the easiest thing to get is a warm introduction from a good friend of yours to somebody at a friend of theirs, right? There's the whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or separation. And so is there an opportunity there for you to ask your friends to make a connection to you, to somebody who works at Intel or somebody who works at Google or somebody, because you want to understand more about how they handle, different HR issues or different, time off policies or, whatever it may be that you're trying to learn more about or how businesses operate. The other thing I would say is that there are a lot of good industry groups. And, there's ACRP, there's SCRS, there's Healthcare Business Women's Association. I belong to Women Corporate Directors. I mean, there's Ophthalmology World Leaders. I mean, every one of these has very different types of industry groups, and to take advantage of them, the roster of people that are there to try to learn from is another thing that I would recommend that people do. It takes time, and some people are nervous about networking. The thing I can tell you is, as long as you're authentic and you have a point of view or a position on something, and you offer up yourself to assist them with a future challenge or issue, it gets a lot easier each and every time.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is, what I've learned in my career is that LinkedIn is, or our Medium would be another vehicle.
Yep.
The opportunity to write something thoughtful, self-authored, begins to grow your network virally.
Yes.
So if you write something that's really good and other people are liking it outside of your network, that's a way for you to grow your sphere of influence. And so, I do try to, every month or so, write a piece that's thoughtful about, how to form a board. I wrote a recent blog post on an article drafting off of NFX of how to find fast water as an organization. Mm-hmm. So there's just a myriad of things, and Medium is a really excellent also platform for thoughtful articles that will reach a particular segment of the marketplace that may connect you to really wonderful individuals that can help nurture and grow your career. The other thing I would applaud is the idea of lean testing. So, I'm a software person. And so one of the things that you always do in software is try to get software in the hands of the person as quickly as possible. Now, I will say that at Microsoft, in the earlier years, we erred on this, and that, the running joke was, don't buy anything from Microsoft until version 3. You don't want to develop that kind of reputation, but you do need to get some real world customer input, and so that you're able to more effectively be able to get feedback, feed it into the development cycle. Internally within Pro-ficiency, we operate in an agile development environment. So every week, literally, our dev team is packaging up the changes over the past week and demoing them to the entire organization. So, the idea of lean testing, move quickly, test in a limited audience to get feedback. The other interesting, we had a large sponsor approach us recently about how to use our platform to interrogate investigators on how to improve protocol design. So something we had never considered before is, one, the cost, and two, the time associated with trying to poll investigators about how they think protocol design could be improved. And so our platform's wonderful. It's multilingual. It's available 7/24. It can be pushed out globally immediately to everyone. And you get real-time analytics in terms of feedback of how to improve protocol design. It's how really consumer-based organizations operate. And so I think the more that we approach quick, lean ways of learning and feed that back into the actual more formal regulated process, the beauty of doing it kind of before you craft the protocol is to get input from the investigators, so that kind of you land with something that is kind of already pre-known, and it's way almost to pre-package their involvement in an upcoming clinical trial.
Yeah, I love that example, Mike. And when I think a lot about what we are not fantastic about as an industry, it is around, development based upon insights from the market and insights from our customers. Again, I'm going to reiterate, sometimes we go back to too many times to the same people, or sometimes we think because we've asked 5 questions that those were the right 5 questions to ask. So is there an opportunity for us to be able to be more agile and more curious in our product development and our process improvement efforts?
No, I think that's great. Jordan, if we could pop up the results of the last poll that we did get a chance to cover those off, and kind of what are the most pressing challenges. One is the tools that are available. So we think, quite frankly, Pro-ficiency has a whole suite of interesting tools that can help you in the deploy and the performance of a clinical trial. Protocoling consistency. So one of the benefits that people get when they sign up with Pro-ficiency is the deep expertise our team has in protocol design. So almost without fail, the first time we get the protocol, we actually return to them a document to say, we noted these inconsistencies in the protocol, or this could be an area which might be prone to confusion. You may want to change some of the language there, et cetera. So I think, that's one of the services we actually help and provide. Enrollment struggles. I think, Jeanne, you're involved with one of the patient recruitment companies. Maybe you could provide a little bit of insight there on patient recruitment, lack of oversight. But I think we're doing really good on the questions, because something else not listed above is always less than the other ones. But maybe touch on patient recruitment for a moment and what we can do as an industry to get better at that.
Yes. I mean, there are, as we all know, there are a number of trials out there, and the statistics are 50% or 80% don't meet their enrollment targets. And sometimes when it's less than 50%, I question if it's just because the target's been moved because the original target was not achieved. Now, we all know that just because we say we're going to recruit one patient per site per month, there's been a tremendous amount of work as it relates to, number one, the data that allows us to feel comfortable about using that number. So using different types of claims data, market research data, patient population data, actually lots of technologies. Beck Health, for example, for one, that I'm on the board, they go into the EHR system and allow you to actually search and identify patients. Then there's another company I'm on the board for, Ripple Science, which is a patient engagement platform, a CRM for patients that allows you to build patient cohorts to then keep active and engaged and informed. So there are a lot of different companies that are addressing these types of challenges that exist from many different angles. And when I continue to think about the patient recruitment problem, I have always been a big believer, and I do think COVID's helping somewhat, that we need more campaigns out there, PSAs, so public service announcements about the importance of clinical trials. Because a lot of people will go to the doctor and get their medication to treat their ailment, but they're not understanding all of the fantastic clinical trial participants and or volunteers that took place in the various programs before them that allowed for these drugs to get approved. And I'd like to see us do more, not just within tools to support and address an issue that exists, but also are there ways in which we can engender a better feeling and belief about the importance of clinical trials globally?
Yeah, a couple of things I want to park on kind of clinical trial recruitment for a moment. So we both were in the NASH space, and so it was an area where commonly people challenged on recruitment. Why? Yes. Because NASH was prevalence primarily in the community, and by the time they went to the academic, they were too far end-stage disease to be appropriate for a clinical trial. So it seems to me that we need to get much better at recruiting community-based. I just put it in my shoes, is that, last thing in the world you want to do is drive to an academic center, struggle to find parking, walk 45 minutes to the meeting with the investigator to find out they're running an hour late. You'd rather pull up to the curb like you do for a community-based internal medicine visit, be 15 steps from the lobby, and be reasonably sure that they're going to meet with you on time. So what is your thought about the need to be more community-based for recruiting as opposed to solely relying upon the academics?
Oh, I think the time is now. And, years ago in 2015, I wrote and co-authored a white paper with Jennifer Byrne called Clinical Research as a Care Option. Jennifer and I talked just several months ago how we need to change it as clinical research as a care option for all. And when we said for all, we meant that meant wherever you are in, the United States or outside the United States, that you need to be able to have an opportunity to not have to have the experience that you just talked about. So specifically not having to pay to park, go to a big deck, it's pouring rain outside, walk with your umbrella, you already have an ailment, you're nervous, and you have to walk 45 minutes to get to the researcher's location. We don't need that. We need patients to be able to receive clinical research as a care option at the point in which they actually genuinely and generally receive care. So I couldn't agree more. And I am a big proponent for looking at community-based care centers and different avenues. So I love the fact that CVS, I love the fact that Walgreens, everyone's considering different points at which patients receive their care in that patient journey, and how can we help them to get access to clinical research. I also know, though, that in doing that increases a tremendous amount of complexities within a trial. So what we don't want to do is have a lot of patients be receiving cares in an environment where those individuals are not trained. So again, putting a plug for Pro-ficiency, the ability to do simulation-based training at those various locations for those various individuals who might be newer to research. Also, I think that when we think about the other locations where patients are going to receive care, there are other ancillary departments. So for example, the imaging center might be outside, the pharmacy might be outside. So how do we maintain and manage that network of different stakeholders who are part of the clinical research ecosystem? How do we make sure that they're trained, informed, communicated with, provided updates? So another really good opportunity for a mixture of where technology and services can come and intersect.
Yeah, the other thing I think in the patient recruitment side is we don't think about marketing at all. So not only public service announcements, but also having compelling reasons to join trials. So Pro-ficiency right now is working on a video with a NASH patient where they had end-stage liver disease at 35, not obese, non-alcoholic, and required a liver transplant. And so we're taping a video that we'll offer up to the NASH recruiting sites to really tell the story of this is a silent disease. If you have an opportunity to help create a better solution for NASH as opposed to a liver transplant, which is challenging, costly, dangerous, you ought to help do that. I just don't think we think about it like that. We don't think about it from the patient perspective and how you drive behavioral change on the patient's part. So we're really excited to be trialing this as an idea that we also could apply potentially to other types of therapeutics. So we look at online training, training in general, it's good that I think we've abandoned largely the traditional in-person training. It seems like we have a heavy mix toward traditional training documents through Zoom sessions. Now, we often describe our platform as, would you rather have the pilot of your airplane trained in a simulator, or would you rather have them trained over Zoom and with 200 PowerPoint slides? And so I think that's a little bit of the challenge we've gotten, keeping the traditional means of communication, but adding another layer of complexity by having PowerPoint slides delivered over Zoom. Thrilled with the fact 31% are looking at simulation as kind of their way of delivering training. We certainly want to see more than that. And then some are not doing any of the above. And so I love that feedback that we got in that particular survey. Now, I know you recently joined the board, and why don't you talk about kind of when we originally reached out, what intrigued you about the company, joining the board, kind of how did you think you would make a difference?
It's a great question. So when you reached out, I said, well, Mike's going to ask me, I can't say no. No, that's not. I looked at the business and as I shared, I spent a couple of years in special education. And then I have spent, 20 plus years and 25 plus years in this industry. And what was interesting for me was when I came into this industry, I realized how lackluster, for lack of a better term, our curriculum was for how we trained individuals and how we invested in those individuals' training. As opposed to a special needs teacher, I would spend weeks on the exact same topic trying to master proficiency and get to a level of proficiency with those students, obviously dealing with a very different types of population than we are in our industry. So what I liked when I saw what you were doing and the team was doing was, first of all, it's engaging. I have a very short attention span, and same with the students that I taught years ago. And one of the biggest challenges that I always had in these online Zooms where there are 200 plus slides, or even in a meeting room when there's 200 plus slides, was the invention of the BlackBerry or the iPhone. Because in those environments, somebody like me who is easily distracted multitasks. And therefore, my level of proficiency is not as high as when I'm in a captive environment and has to prove the skills that I have learned. So I love the fact that you guys are doing that. I also like the fact that it's fun, and we don't have enough fun in our jobs every day. So the ability to actually go into a proficiency training simulation and have fun and learn something, and then have my skills and learnings tested, especially as I'm also partially competitive, that's a lot of fun for me. So those were some of the reasons why I was really interested. I also, I just genuinely like how you guys are going about tackling the different challenges and supporting the reductions in mistakes, to helping to improve general performance of a workforce, helping to improve general performance on a clinical trial that allowed for the expeditious approval of a potential new drug on the market. So that your mission and vision really resonated with me, Mike. So that's the reason why I was excited to join the board and what I've learned.
No, we're thrilled to have you on the board. We have a few questions I want to hit before we shut down for the afternoon. But one question comes from Duncan asking if there are any before and after results, even anecdotal, you can share about simulation training for clinical trial professionals. So I'll take that one on. So every time after a professional completes training on our platform, we get feedback from them in a variety of dimensions. So one, is this the best training you've ever had, or at least on par with the best training you've ever had? 89% of the participants indicate that was the case. We asked them also, do you think this training will help you avoid a protocol deviation? So that's more anecdotal than real, but 85% believe the training pointed out an area that if they had just read the protocol and operated as they typically did, that they would have possibly created a protocol deviation on the study. Other data that we've seen is significant reduction in SIV cost. So we had a very complex study globally that was multidisciplinary, including interventional radiology, oncologists, et cetera. And what they found is they were able to avoid actually physically going out to 85% of the sites, which was a multi-million-dollar savings. So, we have pretty good outcomes data. We're actually just launching a study now, an oncology study, to separate the population of investigators into those trained with simulation and those trained in a traditional manner. Every time we've suggest that to a sponsor, it causes problems for them, because in the end they believe simulation's better. So then would they get in trouble for choosing an inferior way to position against simulation? So that's been a challenge for us. I think another really great question came in, and that was the impact of the recession and inflation on the clinical trial industry. You think there will be, or you already seen signs of that? And
oh yeah, I'm already seeing
you in reaction to that.
Yeah, and Mike, I'm seeing a lot of signs of that. So specifically, it's clear that as inflation is at over 9%, the cost of labor, which is a large driver in our $96 billion plus industry, is going up. And as a result, we need to find ways that we can use and work with those resources in a smarter and more efficient manner. So how can we use that? So first of all, when sponsors are going through their selection process, they need to actually be innovating in the questions that they're asking to their service provider and or technology provider. Too many times do I see the same, 500, 400 question RFI come out. And do you really need all those questions answered, please? Like, is it really necessary? Or should you focus on the top 10 or 15 or 20 questions? Because the more times you ask those questions, that means the more people that have to fill out those forms, which drives the overall labor cost up. Additionally to that, we need to be thinking about what data is actually necessary to help us make a decision at a sponsor level. And I definitely think that remote tools can help. Why? Number one, it decreases T&E. So travel and entertainment's gone down, and the actual cost to travel has decreased. And so you can use more remote tools for that. Allows us also to decrease the amount of labor expense that's required in actually traveling. And in addition to that, we've all seen that we can be really efficient, highly productive, and develop world-class drugs while sitting in our couches, with our bunny slippers on. So let's continue to understand that type of model where we're not always having to be together. I'm not suggesting an environment where we're never together, because I love getting together face to face, but where that is actually promoted and accepted is a good thing. And then the last thing I would say is all of that too can drive up employee engagement, which reduces the cost of our labor, because it reduces the cost that we're spending in attracting and retaining talent within this industry.
No, I would agree. I mean, I think of the impact of inflation as actually being another force for good. It forces us to look at doing things more efficiently. Working with a large CRO now that's saying, how could our technology really change how they actually sell and support sponsors in clinical trials? Because they view our technology can be very transformative. It may actually reduce some of the labor billings that they normally would get, but the reality is that's probably necessary and needed by sponsors today. So can you use technology for good? Eric has a question. I think it's a really good one. We'll kind of wind up on that here, Jeannie, and that is, how important is the early adoption of new technologies for large and small CROs and sponsor in order to have leaders in the industry to stay leaders in the industry, as opposed to being followers and laggards, in other words. So I think his question is around, is new technology the key to innovation, or is, technology for technology's sake a trap you could fall in?
Yeah, I think that we as an industry are fickle. And so if technology for technology's sake, those companies won't survive. And as a result, when we're thinking about innovations and we're thinking about small and medium-sized CROs, yes, there is a need for them to be partnering and or developing technology, partnering or buying technologies in order for them to stay competitive. As we all know that a lot of the larger CROs have a lot of this technology in-house to do things like patient ID or patient selection or remote, different types of remote work environments. So I do believe that ensuring that small and mid-sized CROs continue to be early adopters is critical. And I do agree with Eric's comment that a lot of the larger pharma customers are less eager to adopt technology early. I don't want to see that there's none of them that are, because there are several that are technology pioneers. But there's a lot that I would not use that as a definition to characterize them.
No, I think, one of the things that we have Raj and our team is looking at, how do we take our network of investigators and create more connectivity between them? So you think about networking, how LinkedIn works today. What if we had almost like a LinkedIn platform for investigators, a way for them to collaborate, learn, grow, get connected to trials, et cetera. So I do believe that technology is going to have an outsized impact on this industry. I've been around long enough where people looked at the transformation of banking, where my mom stood in line to deposit my dad's payroll check, to today, if you go to a bank, you're lucky to find anyone, let alone someone to wait on you, but you certainly are first in line typically, because all of that is done online. And, quite frankly, that's where we're going to see more and more work in our industry being more virtual based, having the right kinds of tools and techniques in place to create that intimate customer experience without the need to necessarily be in front of the customer. So we're rapidly approaching the end of the hour. I think if we could put up the results from the last quiz, Jordan, we'll finish on that. So the question is today, how do you teach? And pretty fascinating data here. The first thing is lectures. And I think you have to be an incredibly interesting presenter to affect learning via lecture. And also, I think that people are not well attuned to timeline of listening. So in a lecture format, anything over 15 minutes, you probably have totally lost them. So the need to be concise, clear, crisp, etc. The next one is teach via 100-page plus slide decks. So there was a study done by Harvard a few years ago that identified PowerPoint as the worst tool to train people on, yet it is the most prolific tool that's used today in training settings. 100-page documents, and then video-based content. So, I think these tell us that this is an opportunity for great innovation. It's interesting, in our own company, we have a culture of non-traditional communication. So when someone wants to sell an idea internally, I'm as likely to get a video in my inbox explaining why this is a great idea, as opposed to, a 50-page PowerPoint deck or an email. And so I think you need to encourage, and as a leader, model the fact that you really want the organization to communicate in unique ways. One thing I do with my team is, I write a weekly blog post. I call it Mic'd Up, and it's usually a 5-minute read or, at most 2 pages. I use that to communicate kind of where is my head at on strategy. Are we pulling people along? We have people in the UK on our teams. We have, Czech Republic. We have a test engineer in Argentina. We have people spread out all over the US. And so, in this world, you need to have new and different ways of communicating to people than what you have historically. We think we're at the right place, right time, with a very unique technology via immersive simulation to drive change. So we appreciate you attending today. Jeannie, you were wonderful, and clearly you're one of the visionary voices in our industry, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who listened in and put some great questions out there. And thanks, Mike, to you and the entire Pro-ficiency team. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.